Radio Al Ansar podcasts.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Friday evening, and if it's Friday evening, then it's got to be the Business Matters program with me, Anwar Mullah. It's 19 minutes past 7, and we live from the Al Ansar studios bringing you the Business Matters program, brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. With me this evening is my son, Imran. Imran, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, and lovely to be in the studio again.
Yes, always nice to be in the studio and coming out live to the listeners. And we have a very, very faithful guest with us in the studio tonight, a person that needs no introduction, who's been in the studio many times with us. And she's our local tax expert, a partner at Bowman Attorneys, and she is Yasmin Sulaiman. Yasmin, assalamu alaikum, and thanks for joining us once again at Radio Al Ansar.
Wa alaikum salam, and always a pleasure.
Our favorite guest.
Well, if it's Yasmin in the studio, then we know it's got to be around budgeting and budgets. Normally, she joins us when the main budget is delivered, and that's sometime in the month of February, March. But the mini budget was delivered this week by our Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, and tonight we're going to be using Yasmin to unpack what came out of the mini budget. And as we all know, these are very, very unusual times. COVID times, if you want to call them. And the whole budgeting process, which we spoke about in March, has been literally thrown out of the window, and there's been emergency measures put in place, including payments from TERS, etc., which we never ever even thought of when we last spoke. So that means the world is a different place. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Look, I don't want to give away my age, but in the last 20 years of being in practice, I haven't seen a supplementary budget being read. This is the first time, and I think it's been, something that's unusual. I don't think it's ever happened in South African history.
Yes, I mean, tax revenues are certainly not what they were expected to be at budget times. If anything, we're gonna be under on revenue collection. I think Minister Tito Mboweni indicated a figure of around about 300 billion.
Yeah. Look, I think a lot of it is because now revenue is not going to walk through the door anymore. And in large part, it's because businesses weren't able to operate for a long time. Some businesses still can't operate. If you look at the tobacco industry and some of the hospitality industry and so on, and then their employees can't earn income as well. So that has the knock-on effect immediately of SARS not being able to collect any revenue. It wasn't something that was contemplated in February. And, as I said, this is the first time, I think, in history that it's really happened, that we've got the supplementary budget. If you look at the budgeting process, what we spoke about in February was the annual budget, where the major announcements were made for the year. And if you look at what's happened since, it's been completely upended. Whatever was proposed in February has been turned on its head. A lot of priorities have changed in terms of expenditure. Some tax proposals that they made in February are now going to be pushed out and maybe changed a bit in future. In this budget here, they didn't mention anything about tax proposals, but it was mostly focused on expenditure. But we expect that, from what he's had to say, there's going to be more taxes coming through in the next year or so.
Yes, there was speculation in the days leading up to this mini budget that even income taxes may be raised immediately. There was a speculation. That fortunately didn't happen. But you know what? At the moment, money is being dished out as from various sources, and TERS being the one source, Solidarity Fund, whatever. There's so many initiatives that the government has put in place. The other one being the 200 billion rands which they've set aside to help businesses get through this period. And that's through the banks, but being funded by the government. So this money, it's not coming for free.
No, and there's only two places it can come from. Three, should I say. One is taxes, which we know tax collections are depressed. The second is borrowing, which is what we're going to have to do because our expenditure is so much higher than our revenue that we have to borrow the money. And the third option, which is someone from Treasury did mention, is actually print money.
Print
money, which is not the favored option because that has disastrous consequences for an economy. But, that is the third option. And hopefully we don't go down that route. We could end up like Venezuela anytime, sometime soon.
Well, print money is something that America did after 9/11, and it seems to to have taken them out of the
Yeah, but I mean, that's America, and they've got a strength and depth in the economy that we don't have. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, we're very much a smaller player. We're a price taker. We take orders from the rest of the world. We don't set orders. America is in a different position. I mean, they set the standards for the world, and their currency is used as the
benchmark.
The benchmark. Yeah. So they can afford to print money, and it won't affect the dollar. But if we do it, it'll affect the rand immediately.
Maybe later in the program we'll explore a little bit more, as we have some time, about the implications and the consequences of printing money and how a country can be affected. I'm sure inflation will be one of the other consequences of that. But at the moment, I read the inflation numbers the other day. We're well under 3% at the moment.
That's because people have got no money to spend.
Well,
that's why inflation is low. It's very artificial at the moment, So I don't think we can really pin our colours on that mast, that is going to last.
So let's start somewhere, and you alluded to, and you just touched on the fact about the tobacco industry, a major source of revenue for our government as well. Every year when you speak about the budget, you speak about how much more we're going to be paying for a packet of cigarettes and the implications in terms of revenue collection for the government, and it obviously goes up every year.
Yes.
Now we have a complete somersault where the tobacco industry is being shut down, and I again read today there was a court case that was supposed to be taken place next week, where British American Tobacco is bringing action against the government, but that has somehow been pushed out now to sometime in August, which means that the tobacco industry is likely to be closed till at least sometime in August.
Yeah.
And that's
so, I mean, there's been a lot of, especially if you look at Twitter and so on, there's been a lot of action around this whole, the tobacco issue and so on, a lot of commentary and so on from various people and bodies. And they keep citing this amount of about 3 billion rands that has been lost as far as excise duty goes, because now the tobacco industry is no longer producing and no longer paying this excise duty to SARS. But the far wider implication besides the excise duty is the fact that the people that they support, the farmers down the line, the employees and so on, probably they're not getting paid either.
The tobacco growers.
The growers, the people who sell tobacco, things like that. So there's a whole supply chain that's being affected. So the 3 billion rands, in the bigger scheme of things, of being a 300 billion rand short, 3 billion rand in excise revenue is a drop in the it's a drop in the ocean, really, But the far wider implication of all the other role players in the industry, if you think of the person who picks the tobacco leaves from the farm, who now maybe doesn't have a job anymore,
right.
That has far bigger implications, for the country than just the excise duty.
And that possibly is playing into the unemployment numbers which we are seeing at the moment.
I mean, at the end of the day, what we did was we stopped economic activity.
Yeah.
We stopped economic activity. We told people you can't earn a living. And now that most people are able to start earning a living, it's hard to do so because now the jobs are not available anymore. Or the business that you would like to do is not easy to do because now your customers have dried up.
Well, everything has been implicated from landlords that have stopped collecting rentals because the shops were closed, to the retrenchments that we're hearing about is horrendous.
And look, I have to say, if I look at my client base, there's very few clients that I've got that have said that they are not retrenching. The vast majority of them are retrenching in some shape or form in the next few months.
Or reducing salaries.
Well, most people have reduced salaries already. Almost all the clients I've spoken to, people across the board have taken cuts. In salary. Very few have been able to maintain full salaries during this time.
So we're actually pressing what we term a reset button in a lot of ways.
More like a stop button. Now we're pressing restart and trying to crank up the engine, I think.
And all of these negative effects that we've just spoken about, I think that can lead us on to the next part of the conversation, which is the GDP outlook.
Yeah, look, in February when the budget speech was read, the forecast for GDP wasn't fantastic. It was just over a 1% growth forecast at that time. And
people were happy with that, given where we were.
Well, no, we weren't happy with it, but given the circumstances of the country, we said, okay, fine, this is the best we can hope to achieve.
Post-state capture, new president.
But we're hoping for better. But now we expect the economy to contract by 7.2% this year. Contract. That's big.
That's massive.
That's
That's
unheard of historically.
Well, I think it's. I read the other day that it's the biggest contraction since the Great Depression.
Wow.
Sure.
So I mean that's how big it is.
And reading articles on the budget speech, if we put that into a global context, the global economy is set to shrink by approximately 5.2%.
Yeah.
So we've exceeded that.
Yeah, but I think it goes to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I mean, we already were in a tough position before this whole COVID-19 crisis came about, and there are structural reforms that are required in the country, and those things haven't happened. And I think we're going to see it playing out now. We're going to be worse off than most other countries are.
Yes, the major factor is how long does the pandemic last? And as I've been watching it, yesterday was the highest infection rate ever for us in this country. We had over 6,000 cases for the day. And we remember the days not too long ago we were getting 1,000 to 2,000 cases a day. But yesterday was over 6,000 and it's increasing. The Western Cape being the worst affected at the moment, where I think over 50% of your cases are coming from the Western Cape, followed by Eastern Cape, followed by Gauteng, and we in KZN are fourth on the list. But we're soon to follow, it seems like. And the real spike or the real crux of the matter where we will hit our peak is probably about another 2 months down the line, which means economic activity is going to be muted for quite a while still to come.
Yeah, look, the economic fix we find ourselves in, my personal view is that it's not COVID that caused it, it's the government action that caused it.
Do you think we locked down too quickly?
Hey, I wouldn't like to yes, I think we did.
Yeah.
But I think we locked down too quickly. But I also think that we took a knee-jerk reaction, And, I think at the end of the day, you didn't allow people to be economically active. I mean, a lot of people are now faced with poverty and hunger, and the consequences of that are probably going to be far worse than being sick with COVID. I don't want to reduce or minimize anybody's suffering in any way, but the end of it is that, it's a flu. Yes, it's a severe flu, but most people are living through it.
Yes, the mortality rate is just under 2% in this country.
And the reason why we locked down was to get the hospitals ready. That's really what it was. It wasn't because we knew we could fight this. I mean, we're not in New Zealand who could reduce the infection rate to zero. We're not in that fortunate position. Our population is not small enough, and our living conditions are not
first world, yes.
Yeah, first world. So, we knew going into it, there was no ways we're going to get that infection rate down to zero. So all we were doing was delaying things. So really the lockdown was to get the hospitals ready. And I don't think from whatever I've read that we're going to escape the spread of it. I mean, it's going to spread.
Yes.
That's the nature of this thing.
Yeah, I come back to the point when we did this mass donation at King Edward. And we were told by the professor there that 70% of your population will have to be infected, and the other 30% will develop what they call herd immunity.
Exactly.
So if 70% of your population is eventually going to be affected, that means then in every household of ours, there are going to be one or two people on average that is going to be affected.
No, unless there is a cure or something like that. I mean, the only time we're going to normalize it is if we get that herd immunity or if we get this magical cure or vaccine that they're talking about. But, I mean, at the end of the day...
but even when we get the vaccine, then the Molanas will be saying, some will say take it and some will say don't take it. And
okay, I'm not going to say anything about that.
So we're not going to win on that one.
At the end of the day, you can't stop people from living.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of it, if you had a choice between getting the flu, a severe flu, and being down and out for 2 weeks, and being economically active and being able to earn a living to support your family, what would you do? Most people would take the second option.
I think there also is a lot of depression that has come about because of what has happened. I mean, people that were in good, stable jobs suddenly not having jobs, and they're feeling the impact of that. Hard to face a family when you don't have an income.
Yeah.
I've heard of cases of people actually committing suicide, not in our community, but I've heard of people committing suicide because of the very nature of what has happened and couldn't face the fact that they didn't have a job any longer. So there's a lot of deaths that are going to be caused, or sicknesses and illnesses that are going to be caused because of COVID, but because not from the COVID itself, but
Yes.
from the associated parts of
and
it.
I think we're going to see that impact. A lot of people have been forced to change the way they work as well. It hasn't been easy for those that are fortunate enough to be able to work remotely. It's been very difficult, to manage your family and household as well as your work. And then a lot of them are, that are able to work, had to work under, for less money. As I said, most companies cut salaries. The only sector that I know for sure didn't cut any salaries was public sector.
Yes.
They got wage
whether
increases,
the
yeah.
guys worked or not, they got their full salaries. But those in the private sector, didn't go unscathed. Most of the companies we know of, people took salary cuts or couldn't pay their staff at all.
Yes, which brings us to the TERS payments that the government has put. You think that was a wise move?
Well, the UIF has been one of the entities that's had a surplus for a long time. And the issue was how to access that money.
Right.
Because there's more contributors to UIF than people who actually claim UIF benefits. And I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, there was actually a budget proposal to say that there would be a UIF holiday for a year, or maybe even longer than that, because they had enough money, they had sufficient money. So they said, well, you know what, in fact, you keep the contributions, you don't need to pay it. And then the union said, no, we must continue with this UIF contributions because they wanted to broaden the base of people that could benefit from it. Right, but UIF has historically been one of those governmental organizations that had sufficient money, had surpluses. So I think it was the obvious thing to tap into it now. But that's not a bottomless well of money either. It's only going to go so far, even with so many people that are in need of it.
Yes,
so,
but also tapping on the UIF is fine for now as a temporary measure. But remembering that the people that are going to be benefiting from the UIF in the future, their payouts or their values will be eroded because of the money coming out of the UIF.
I don't know whether that's quite true because, I think UIF, you could be a lifelong contributor,
Yes.
but when you get retrenched or fired, you only get benefits for a certain finite number of months.
Yes.
So it's not like you get lifelong benefits
No.
from them. So to be honest, if people start working and start contributing again, I think they'll replenish their funds fairly quickly. But the problem is going to be now that they've used up quite a lot of the money and there are retrenchments planned in the near future by certain companies, I think there could be a cash crunch there
Yes,
as well.
the one big worrying factor at the moment is the Edgar's Group, as we've heard about, because they've sent out retrenchment notices to 22,000 employees.
Yeah.
So if things don't work out there, in that the business is not sold or somebody takes it over, then we're going to be in a situation where you're going to have likely 22,000 people that are going to be looking to the UIF to support them for a period of time.
Yeah,
and that is going to
SAA
be a drain.
as well, for that matter.
SAA
And
being another one.
there's some mines that have said that they're going to retrench. Isn't Telcom as well?
I think
there's
Cell
quite a
C
few-
also
Yeah,
said they're going to
yeah.
retrench a lot of people.
So
So,
there's been,
retrenchments
quite-
are going to be coming thick and fast.
Yes.
Sasol being another one. I read an
Yes.
article today where they're saying from the middle of August they're going to be retrenching because based on oil prices and their predicament that they are in, they're not going to be able to sustain the staff as they have at the moment. So where are all these people going to find jobs?
I don't think they're going to find jobs. I think they'll have to find other ways of being economically active. Whether it is making things, selling things, buying things, whatever. But, I don't think that the formal economy is going to be creating jobs at a fast enough rate. And I know, from a government point of view, I think they want to throw quite a bit of money towards like the expanded public works program and so on and create jobs that way. But it's not sustainable in the long run, Public sector is not the place where we should be creating jobs. It has to come from the private sector because public sector, you have to pay from taxes, So, I think what's probably going to happen, you have to go to encourage entrepreneurship, going to have to encourage small businesses and give them the room to grow. I don't think large companies and the formal sector are necessarily going to put on a lot of jobs in the next few years.
So taking a look at the budget and looking at some of the hard numbers, just some facts. We've exceeded 2 trillion rand in budget spending for the first time ever. Estimated revenue collection was 142 billion rand, actual revenue collection, as opposed to the target of 177 billion rand. So we're already about 35 billion rand behind target. And we were already on quite a tight line with regards to where we're going to get the money and how we're going to allocate the money. So how do we catch up this 35 billion rand? How does South Africa make this target?
So I don't think they're planning to actually catch up this year. So if you look at the budget, what the minister mentioned was they expect to be 300 billion behind by the end of the financial year. So compared to what so we've already got 35 of that 300 billion, but they're expecting another 265 billion rand shortfall in collections in the next few months. And that's because the economy is not going to be at full steam. A lot of employees are going to be out of jobs, so they're not going to be contributing to the PAYE and all that sort of thing. But, I mean, to counter that, look, there haven't been any significant tax proposals. But I think what he's really emphasized is more of the same. So if you remember back in February, and in fact, I think over the last few years that I've spoken to you guys, there's a few focus areas that SARS had. It's like where they expect money to come from.
Correct.
And one of those areas is going to be looking at international transactions, transfer pricing when it comes to multinationals. And that's nothing new. I mean, they've been saying it for the last 10 years. Now I can see it actually coming out a lot
because
more.
They need that money.
Well, they need, internationally, those are focus areas, but now it's even more so. There's impetus now to do more. And you can see it playing out in reality because a lot more multinationals are getting transfer pricing queries from SARS compared to previously. They expect to increase enforcement action, especially to eliminate syndicated fraud with VAT. VAT refunds are riddled with fraud, fraudulent activities and so on. And if you've been in business and you've had a VAT refund recently, you must know that you're going to be queried. I mean, virtually.
I think they're paying out VAT refunds at the moment.
They were. March and April, focus was very much on getting money back into the economy.
Yeah.
That's changed in, I could say, the last few weeks. From what we've noticed, a lot more clients are getting queries on their VAT refunds, where they're doing a lot more verification first before releasing refunds. And then one of the things they want to do is to expand, third-party verification. So if you say on your tax return that you earned interest income of 50,000 rands, they want to use third-party information to confirm that that's correct.
Okay.
So
double-checking the IT3Bs.
But besides IT3Bs, to cross-check, if you say you've got assets of so much on your income statement, in your tax return, is it borne out by the deeds office and what the motor vehicle searches say and all that sort of thing, So, it's information that SARS always had at its disposal but wasn't using effectively. I think they're trying to use that more effectively going forward. And then also trying to enforce the collection of debt. So if you owe money to SARS, you can expect a call. I think they're going to be a bit more aggressive as far as collecting their debt. And I don't think they're going to be very sympathetic if you've got lots of outstanding tax returns and so on. Because, it's an easy area for them to say, well, submit your tax return, maybe you owe me some money and you'll have to pay it.
All that is very well said and done. But I think it's also with the volumes that have been spent so quickly. I mean, the 500 billion that has been spent. We're still going to be searching for a lot of money, and perhaps we go for an ad break and come back and we discuss more fully the implications of borrowing that money, where we can borrow from, and at what cost to the economy and to ourselves. So with that, let's do an ad break.
Your station, my station, our station, Radio Al Ansar.
Hi, I'm Jenny Morris, and you're listening to Radio Al Ansar.
We are unity, and you are listening to Radio Al Ansar.
Business Matters.
Yes, it's Business Matters. You with me, Anwar Mullah. It's a Friday evening, and we have with us in the studio Yasmin Suleiman. Before the ad break, we were unpacking the mini budget that Minister Tito Mboweni presented this week. A very, very unusual mini budget and one that is not very, very attractive to most of us. If you want to pose any questions to Yasmin in the studio, the phone number is 031-942-7946. I repeat that, 031-942-7946. Or you can WhatsApp us on 060-904-1056. Any questions related to the mini budget or tax proposals in general, or the economy as we see it at the moment. Yasmin, we were speaking a bit about the fact that we would need to borrow as a country because of the fact that we've exceeded we're spending a lot of money to counter this COVID pandemic, and one of those or two of those places that one can borrow from is the IMF and the World Bank. But that doesn't come cheap, and it comes with a whole lot of conditions attached. In experience from other countries, what would be the implications of borrowing from the IMF and the World Bank?
Okay, before we get to the IMF and World Bank, just want to explain, South Africa generally has been borrowing locally. So, as a country, we've borrowed locally. That means, raised local bonds and so on. And what the minister mentioned was that if they had to borrow locally in order to fund the deficit, there wouldn't be enough savings left in the country for anybody else to use.
Really?
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why they're looking at international resources, right? And I think thus far they've not really approached the IMF and World Bank seriously, but I think it's going to come. Right? And the problem with IMF and World Bank is when they come in, they impose quite stringent measures on a country. They say to them, look, in order to repay our debt, you're going to have to take these steps. And some of the steps are austerity measures, where you have to slash government spending. So, if you look at Greece and Argentina and those kind of countries, that's what's happened, where those institutions have provided funding and said, well, your public spending can't be more than a certain amount, which means that from a public point of view, public services point of view, you have to look at what you can cut. A lot of that means sometimes you have to get rid of quite a few staff. Which is not palatable, but it has to be done and so on. So, I think basically you're handing over the control of the country to somebody else.
Yes, but you're going to then have the counter of the unions opposing that as well, because the unions are going to...
By that time, it'll be too late. There'll be no money left, really. And it's something we'd like to avoid, because at the end of the day, austerity measures don't really help. Wise spending helps, but austerity measures says, they say across the board, no spending,
Yeah, but we have a situation at the moment where the private sector is saying, well, we've all been having to take these cuts and no work, no pay and everything. But yet the public sector has not had any implications. Everybody sat at home and they still the teachers collected their full salary, and everybody in public services collected their full salary, and they haven't been affected at all. If anything, they're still in line for increases. And it goes against the grain of the rest of the economy. You're now having a major discrepancy between the public sector and the private sector.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, I think the government had to pay. At the end of the day, if an employer could afford to pay their staff, they should have paid their staff over this last few months. Right? And there are some private sector employees who are able to do so. We're fortunate enough to do so, but not everybody could. The public sector was in a position, I think the government would have made it much worse. Imagine what spending would have been like if they said, okay, we're cutting public sector salaries as well. Right. Then the economy wouldn't have been just gloom and doom. It would have just been doom, So, I think it is, the reality is where they weren't able to cut public sector salaries, and a lot of them were essential workers in any event.
Okay, so we're talking about World Bank, IMF, and you said that if they do lend, they come with stringent lending conditions, and they would literally dictate to you how you run your economy. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, because we've been spending money willy-nilly on all the wrong things. Yeah,
but I don't think that austerity measures automatically mean that you'll still spend whatever little bit you're spending on the right things.
Yes. Okay.
You still got to change behavior. I think this has been a recurring theme the last few discussions we've had about what do we spend money on, and is it value for money? That we get in return. And, that has to change. I think the unfortunate thing is, and it was very sad to see, because going into the lockdown, a lot of people were very supportive of it. But it became apparent that there was a lot of corruption going on as well. Then people got disillusioned with this whole thing, as to whether the money that was being spent wisely,
So looking at the budget, two things on the previous point of budgeting. So, firstly, Minister Tito Mboweni urged municipalities to go back to the zero-based budgeting model. Mm-hmm. And the second thing, he mentioned that Minister Senzo Mchunu is in negotiating with labor movements to compensate workers at a fiscally sustainable public sector compensation level. So it was very vague. He touched upon these points. There were no numbers thrown to it. So all subjective speak, call it that. Do you think these things will actually come to light?
I think, it'd be good if they could go to zero-based budgeting, because actually it means you question every expenditure line and you say, well, instead of saying, well, what did I spend last year? And they just put a number to it and they just carry on. And then, as I said before, the way the public sector is incentivized is that you've got a budget, you must spend it, whether it's for value or not, because if you don't, you won't get the same amount next year.
So that's essentially the wise spending you speak of, instead of someone coming in and telling us to do it.
Yeah, so it'd be good if that could be implemented, that every expenditure line item say, well, should I spend it on this or should I spend it in a different way? Whether we've got the public officials who will do that, I don't know. Okay. And I'm hoping that there would be some level of buy-in from the wider, the public sector be able to do something like that. But when it comes to the public sector wage bill, I think I've said this before. I don't really mind paying people money as long as you get the productivity from them.
Fair enough.
And so people are working, then they deserve to be paid.
True. I think that implies that some civil servants will be possibly overstaffed. In ending that statement, Minister Tito Mboweni said, Senzo Mchunu is in negotiations with the labour movements to compensate civil servants at a sustainable level. We wish him well. I'm not sure if that was a joke.
Well, I think he got wrapped over the knuckles previously for saying that there wouldn't be any salary increases for the public sector. I think if you remember, I think it was the budget speech or the medium-term budget that he actually said something to that effect. And it wasn't he's not his playing ground.
Yeah.
He'd like that there be no increases in public sector wage bill, but whether that can play out in reality is a different story.
I think I share your sentiments on... we don't mind paying for it if you're seeing the efficiency and productivity coming out.
Yes.
The other point that came out in the budget was that we plan on creating GDP growth through infrastructure development. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think investment in infrastructure is vitally important for the country, because you can't expect, like for example, if you look at like an ESCOM, you can't expect industry to grow if you don't have a stable electricity supply.
Okay.
You have to have a good road network. You have to have a good rail network. You have to have efficient ports, airports, all that sort of thing, so that businesses can thrive, right? So it's critical to invest in infrastructure, and it has a long-term positive benefit for the country. But one of the things that is a problem here in the country is that we tend to overspend on our infrastructure.
Okay.
So, if you take like the Medupi power station, what it was meant to cost versus what it actually did cost us.
And it's still not right.
Yes. Yeah. And whether proper planning has happened.
I think PRASA jumps to mind.
Yeah, sorry?
PRASA jumps to mind.
Yes, those kind of things. So, yes, we need to invest in infrastructure, but the right infrastructure at the right price. We shouldn't be just saying, we're going to spend 20 billion in infrastructure and all we get is one highway, It doesn't really make sense. So I support infrastructure spending, but being done wisely and in a cost-effective manner and in the right things. The infrastructure that is needed in order to grow the economy, things that businesses actually need.
Well, that also begs the question in some of the decisions that were taken now during the COVID period from an economic perspective. For example, why open up alcohol sales and not tobacco sales? We touched on it earlier. It's one of the factors. And certain decisions that have been made have certainly not been done in terms of logic or reasonable thinking, but rather more from a political perspective. More, it just doesn't make any sense. So
I'm the wrong person to comment on that.
It's quite blatant.
But you're right. There's some things you don't really understand what the rationale behind it was.
Yes. So we the important thing at the moment is to get through this pandemic from a health perspective more than anything else. We find people getting sick, and we wish all of them well, and Allah give them complete shifa. And we hear of deaths now closer to home. People that we actually know, and before it was like we heard of a distant person. Now it's becoming a reality where we're seeing people in our own community. I saw a list today or there was some program taking place tonight, and for making dua for shifa for people, and they listed the people, and this was a Johannesburg stroke Transvaal list, and there were 150 people listed there. Were people that I couldn't relate to many of those names. I knew some of them, but people that were in our community, whether they're from Logium or Johannesburg Central, Mayfair, wherever, and it shows. I mean, there was a list of 150. How many more that are not known about, that were not on that list? So if a similar list was drawn up of people in the Durban stroke Maritzburg area, we would be surprised at how many of our own people that we know in our close vicinity are affected by this thing.
Yeah, look, it's true. But at the end of the day, you can't put all life on hold in case I get sick. And at the end of the day, if you're meant to die at a certain time,
your time
whether
is written.
It's by COVID or some a bus is going to knock you over, you're going to die.
Okay, we can have that.
We're not going to stop that.
So bottom line, the budget, you approve, disapprove, and what would you change?
So this budget, it wasn't really a budget. It was more like a summary of all the things that happened already and a warning of what's to come. And so what he's really summarized is all the expenditure that the government already committed to, said where some of that money was going to come from in terms of reprioritizing expenditure, moving from one place to another and so on. Indicated a bit where he was going to get some of the borrowings from. Indicated that, tax increases are coming. SARS, in the meantime, is going to increase enforcement action and audit activity and all that. But in February next year, there will be some tax proposals that's going to come through. I suspect we're probably going to see another VAT rate increase because that's going to be the easiest way to raise a lot of money quickly. So, that he mentioned that. But the main thing that he wanted to warn us about was the debt. Our debt is going to is
debt 80 as in DEBT, not DEATH.
yeah, debt as in liabilities. So I mean, as a country, 80% of our GDP is our debt.
Right.
And out of every 1 rand of government spending, 21 cents goes towards interest at the moment.
Well, now it's closer to 30 cents after
No, it's 21 cents.
Is it 21 cents?
Yes, but if we let it go any further, when we spoke at the budget time, it was about 12 cents.
And now it's 21 cents.
21 cents.
So 21 cents of every rand collected is just going to service interest.
Well, look, a lot of it's going to local bondholders. Yeah. So it's circulating in the economy, so that's okay. But the moment it leaves the country, I mean, obviously it's a problem. But but it's not sustainable.
Yasmin, thanks for joining us. It's been quite a gloomy discussion, but that's the reality of what it is. And we need to all prepare ourselves for some hard times to come. Certainly not life as normal as we all know it. But inshallah, with everybody's du'as, we'll get through it somehow or the other, and we'll come out smiling. And maybe when we meet you again for the February budget, there'll be some brighter news.
Maybe you'll see me in October for the medium-term budget. Maybe maybe there'll be new changes.
Yeah, well, okay. With that, Imran, some parting comments?
I think it's a gloomy budget and it's a warning to the country. If you have money, you should be thrifty in your spending. You shouldn't be out there. Wasteful expenditure is not a good thing at the moment. Interest rates are cut and they try to boost, and consumer spending was supposed to be boosted through that. But my comment is still, be thrifty with your money, hold on to it at this moment in time, watch your spending, and it'll help you, definitely help you in the long run. Okay,
Yasmin, your parting comments?
I agree with you on that. Although stopping consumer spending is not going to help the economy, but certainly with the uncertainty, I think the more people are careful with their money, the better it'll be from a personal welfare point of view. You don't know what's going to be in the next few months. And I certainly hope that we see the other side of this pandemic sooner rather than later.
So, Imran, on a lighter note, what you've just said means that no lavish holidays at the end of this year for us as a family. We have to be thrifty with every cent we have. So, you can take that message back home. Okay, with that, Alhamdulillah, we've reached the end of our program, and it's been lovely having Yasmin here unpacking the so-called mini budget. And inshallah, we'll get her back for the medium-term budgeting. And inshallah, we'll be with you again next week on another Business Matters program. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Radio Al Ansar Podcasts.